The sound of a heavy fist slamming against the polished mahogany desk echoed like a gunshot through the sterile air of the law office, causing the crystal water pitcher to rattle violently on its silver tray. It was a sound of raw, unadulterated fury, the kind that bypasses logic and stems directly from a wounded animal instinct. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Houston skyline shimmered under a relentless, oppressive heat wave, the kind of Texas summer afternoon that makes the air feel heavy enough to choke on. But inside the climate-controlled sanctuary of Henderson and Associates, the temperature was freezing, yet the atmosphere was volatile enough to ignite. Nathan Pierce stood over the desk, his chest heaving like a bellows, his face a map of vascular stress. Veins bulged prominently against his sun-damaged skin, specifically the temporal artery throbbing dangerously at his temple. He was a large man, built from years of physical labor, perhaps in the oil fields or construction, contrasting sharply with the delicate, high-end decor of the room. His knuckles were white, the skin stretched tight over the bone, and his breathing was ragged, audible, a guttural sound that seemed to scrape against his throat. He wasn't just angry, he was being consumed by it. Every fiber of his being was vibrating with a sense of injustice so profound it looked painful. Sitting opposite him, sinking slightly into the plush leather of the guest chair, was his younger brother, Gregory. The contrast could not have been more theatrical if it had been staged for a play. Gregory was immaculate. His charcoal suit was tailored to perfection, hugging a frame that had clearly never known the hardship of manual labor. He sat with his head bowed, his shoulders slumped in a posture of classic defeat and mourning. He held a handkerchief to his face, dabbing delicately at the corners of his eyes, his body trembling with what appeared to be suppressed sobs. To the untrained eye, to the lawyer sitting behind the desk, and to anyone watching from a distance, Gregory was the picture of a grieving son being bullied by an aggressive, greedy older brother. But Dr. Arthur Vance was not looking with an untrained eye. Arthur sat in the corner of the room, almost blending into the shadows of the bookshelf. He had been hired by the Executor Bank, a standard procedure for high-stakes inheritance disputes where coercion or mental instability was suspected. He hadn't spoken a word since the meeting began 20 minutes ago. He sat with a stillness that was almost predatory, his legs crossed, his hands resting loosely in his lap. He wasn't listening to the words being screamed. He was watching the music of the bodies. He was a mentalist, a master of non-verbal communication, a man who had spent decades mapping the geography of the human face and the involuntary betrayals of the human nervous system. To Arthur, people didn't speak with their mouths. They screamed the truth with their pupils, their pulse points, and the fleeting micro-expressions that flashed across their faces for a fraction of a second before the conscious brain could mask them. "You think I'm going to let you walk away with the land?" Nathan roared, his voice cracking under the strain. He pointed a trembling finger at Gregory, a finger calloused and scarred. "Dad promised me that acreage. I worked it. I bled on it while you were out partying in Austin. You think because you show up here with your fake tears and your expensive suit that you can just erase 30 years of my life?" Gregory didn't look up. He just shook his head slowly, a movement that seemed practiced, measured. When he spoke, his voice was a soft, trembling whisper, perfectly pitched to elicit sympathy. "Nathan, please. Not now. Not with Dad barely cold in the ground. Can't we just honor his memory with some dignity? Why does it always have to be about money with you?" The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man whose hairline was receding almost as fast as his patience, cleared his throat nervously. He adjusted his glasses, looking from the raging bull that was Nathan to the wounded lamb that was Gregory. It was clear whose side the lawyer was emotionally leaning towards. Human beings are hardwired to protect the vulnerable, and Gregory was projecting vulnerability with the skill of a maestro. "Mr. Pierce," the lawyer said, addressing Nathan with a tone of reprimand. "Please sit down. Your aggression is not helping your case. If you cannot control your temper, I will be forced to ask security to escort you out, and we will proceed with the reading in your absence." Nathan looked like he was about to explode. He turned his wild eyes toward the lawyer, his mouth opening to unleash another torrent of abuse. But Arthur Vance watched something else. He watched Nathan's throat. He saw the hard swallow, the bobbing of the Adam's apple. He saw the moisture gathering on Nathan's upper lip. It wasn't just sweat from the heat. It was the physiological response to a fight-or-flight trigger. Nathan was terrified. His anger was a shield, a desperate defense mechanism against the feeling of being robbed, not just of money, but of his identity, his history, his connection to his father. Arthur shifted his gaze to Gregory. This was where the picture began to fracture. Gregory was still dabbing his eyes, but Arthur noticed the handkerchief. It was dry. He looked at Gregory's breathing pattern. When a person is genuinely crying, the diaphragm spasms. The breath becomes erratic, shallow, often interrupted by sharp intakes of air, the classic hiccup of sorrow. Gregory's shoulders were shaking, yes, but his chest was rising and falling in a rhythmic, controlled cadence. It was a perfect sine wave of breath. Inhale for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds. This wasn't grief, it was a yoga exercise. It was a calming technique used to lower the heart rate. Why would a grieving man need to lower his heart rate in the middle of an argument? Unless he was afraid his heart rate would give him away. Arthur leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. He focused on Gregory's forehead. The room was cool, yet Nathan was sweating profusely. Gregory, however, was matte. His skin was dry. But then Arthur saw it, a tiny, almost imperceptible sheen of sweat, not on the forehead, but on the upper lip, just below the nose. In the world of body language analysis, this is a specific stress indicator, often associated with deception. It's called the Pinocchio effect. When someone lies, the tissues inside the nose engorge with blood due to the release of histamine, often causing an itch or a slight increase in temperature in that area. Gregory wasn't itching, but his autonomic nervous system was reacting to the stress of maintaining a fabrication. It is fascinating how we are programmed to misinterpret the signals of our own species. We see loud volume and assume aggression. We see quiet tears and assume innocence. But nature is rarely so binary. Often the loudest dog is the most fearful, and the silent snake is the most deadly. If you have ever found yourself in a situation where you were the one screaming the truth, while a liar calmly dismantled your reality, you know the specific kind of hell Nathan is in right now. It is a lonely, maddening place. And if you're watching this and feeling that familiar knot in your stomach, recognizing this dynamic from your own life, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like this video. We tell these stories to shine a light on the dark corners of human behavior, to help you see the truth when others try to blind you. Your support helps us keep these truths coming. Now, back to the office, where the temperature was dropping, but the danger was rising. "I am not sitting down," Nathan yelled, though the volume had dropped slightly, replaced by a desperate crack in his voice. He leaned both hands on the desk, looking at his brother with a mixture of hatred and confusion. "Greg, look at me. Look at me. How can you do this? You know what Dad wanted. You were there at the hospital. You heard him." Gregory finally looked up, and in that split second, Arthur caught the tell. As Gregory lifted his face, he maintained the sad, puppy dog expression with his mouth, the corners turned down, the lips trembling, but his eyes, his eyes were dead. The orbicularis oculi muscles, the muscles that crinkle the corners of the eyes when we feel genuine emotion, whether joy or deep sorrow, were completely relaxed. It was a mask. The bottom half of his face was mourning, the top half was calculating. He looked at Nathan not with sadness, but with contempt. It was a micro-expression, lasting less than a fifth of a second, a flash of pure, unadulterated sneer before the mask of sorrow slipped back into place. "I heard a confused old man on morphine, Nathan," Gregory said softly, his voice laced with a poisonous pity. "And I saw a brother who was trying to manipulate him into signing a new will on his deathbed. That's what I saw." "You liar!" Nathan lunged forward. Mr. Henderson jumped up. "That is enough. Security." "Wait." The word was spoken softly, but it cut through the noise like a razor blade. Dr. Arthur Vance stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't wave his arms. He simply unfolded himself from the chair and walked toward the center of the room. His presence changed the gravity of the space. He was a tall man, wearing a suit that cost more than Nathan's truck, but he moved with a predatory grace that made the price tag irrelevant. He walked to the water pitcher, poured a glass, and took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. He placed the glass down and looked at the lawyer. "Mr. Henderson, before you call security and escalate this into a situation that cannot be undone, I would like to ask a few questions. That is, after all, why the bank sent me." Mr. Henderson looked flustered. "Dr. Vance, clearly this man is unstable. He is threatening violence." "Is he?" Arthur turned his gaze to Nathan. He looked the older brother up and down, not with judgment, but with clinical curiosity. "Nathan, I want you to take a deep breath. Hold it for 3 seconds, then let it out." Nathan blinked, confused by the sudden shift in focus. "Who the hell are you?" "I am the man who is going to save you from making a mistake that will cost you your freedom," Arthur said calmly. "Do it. Breathe." Nathan hesitated, his chest heaving, but something in Arthur's eyes, an absolute unwavering certainty, made him comply. He sucked in a breath, held it, and let it out in a shuddering sigh. "Again," Arthur commanded, "and this time, unclench your right fist. If you keep squeezing it like that, you're going to rupture a tendon." Nathan looked down at his hand, as if realizing for the first time that he was making a fist. He slowly opened his fingers. The blood rushed back into the white knuckles. "Good," Arthur said. He turned his back on Nathan, a gesture of trust that disarmed the older brother completely, and faced Gregory. Gregory had stopped dabbing his eyes. He was watching Arthur with the wariness of a gazelle that has smelled a lion but hasn't seen it yet. He sat up a little straighter, his grief posture vanishing instantly. "And you must be Gregory," Arthur said, his voice pleasant, almost conversational. "The grieving son." "I am," Gregory said, his voice firming up, losing the tremor. "And I don't appreciate being analyzed like a lab rat while I'm mourning my father." "Of course not," Arthur agreed. "Mourning's a private process. It's messy, it's ugly, it's full of snot and bile and ugly crying." Arthur took a step closer. "Which is why I find your performance so ... aesthetic." "Excuse me," Gregory bristled. The indignation was quick, too quick. "Your tears," Arthur pointed out, gesturing vaguely to Gregory's face. "They are remarkably viscous. You see, emotional tears, tears caused by sadness or grief, have a different chemical composition than basal tears or reflex tears. They contain more protein, specifically prolactin and adrenocorticotropic hormones. They tend to be thicker, they stick to the skin, they leave tracks. But your eyes, they are watering, yes, but the water is clear, thin, like the kind of tears one gets when they keep their eyes open for too long without blinking, or perhaps when they use a small amount of menthol on a handkerchief." Gregory flinched. It was subtle, just a twitch of the cheek muscle, but Arthur saw it. He saw the hand holding the handkerchief tighten slightly. "That is absurd," Gregory scoffed, but he lowered the handkerchief from his face, tucking it quickly into his pocket. "I am crying because my father is dead." Are you? Arthur tilted his head. Because your physiology disagrees. When a human being is in deep distress, the blood flows to the vital organs. The extremities get cold. Nathan's hands are pale and clammy. I can see the constriction of the capillaries from here. But you, Gregory, your hands are pink, warm. Your parasympathetic nervous system is humming along quite nicely. You aren't in distress. You are in anticipation. The room went deadly silent. The hum of the air conditioner seemed to get louder. Mr. Henderson looked back and forth between the men, his mouth slightly open. Anticipation of what? Nathan asked, his voice hoarse. Arthur didn't look at Nathan. He kept his eyes locked on Gregory's pupils. That is the question, isn't it? Anticipation usually involves a reward, dopamine. The brain releases it when we are about to get something we want. And right now, Gregory's pupils are dilated. Not from fear, his heart rate is too low for that, but from excitement. Arthur walked around the desk, standing next to the lawyer, effectively taking command of the room. Mr. Henderson, I need to see the file regarding the estate's liquidity, specifically, any transfers or holds placed on the assets in the last 6 months. I can't just show you that, Henderson stammered. Client privilege, ... I am the bank's representative, Arthur reminded him sharply. And if there is fraud being committed in this room, privilege is waived. Open the file. Gregory stood up abruptly. This is harassment. I'm leaving. We can reschedule when my brother isn't acting like a lunatic and you aren't spouting pseudoscience. Sit down, Gregory, Arthur said. The voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of an anvil. If you walk out that door, I will recommend that the bank freeze the entire estate pending a full forensic audit. That will take months, maybe years. Can you afford to wait years, Gregory? Gregory froze. His hand was on the armrest of the chair, his knuckles turning white. For the first time, the mask slipped completely. The sadness vanished, replaced by a flash of pure cold panic. He looked at the door, then back at Arthur. He slowly sank back into the chair. I thought so, Arthur murmured. He turned to Nathan. Nathan, tell me about the argument you had with your father. The one Gregory mentioned, the one at the hospital. Nathan looked ashamed. He rubbed the back of his neck, his anger draining away, leaving him looking exhausted and old. I wasn't trying to manipulate him. Dad was confused. He kept talking about the debt. He kept saying he had to sell the land to pay the debt. I told him there was no debt. The farm makes money. Not a lot, but we're in the black. I got angry because I thought the medication was making him hallucinate. I yelled at him. I told him he was crazy. Tears welled up in Nathan's eyes, real tears, ugly and red-rimmed. I yelled at him on his deathbed because I thought he was losing his mind. And then he died. And the last thing he heard was me shouting. Arthur nodded slowly. He wasn't hallucinating, Nathan. The brain, even in its final moments, tries to resolve outstanding loops. Your father was worried about a debt. But if the farm accounts are clear, whose debt was he worried about? Arthur turned back to Gregory. The younger brother was staring at a spot on the carpet, his jaw clenched so tight, the muscles were jumping rhythmically. The gambling, Arthur said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement thrown out to see where it landed. Gregory's head snapped up. I don't know what you're talking about. The blink rate, Arthur noted verbally, as if dictating notes. It just doubled. You went from 12 blinks a minute to 25 in the last 10 seconds. Cognitive load increase. Your calculator. You're trying to figure out how much I know. Arthur walked closer to Gregory, invading his personal space. He could smell the cologne, now expensive, musky, trying to cover the scent of nervous sweat that was finally starting to break through. Houston has a vibrant underground poker scene, doesn't it? But high stakes require high liquidity. And when the liquidity runs out, the shark starts circling. $2 million. 3. You're insane, Gregory spat, but his voice lacked conviction. It was thin, reedy. "Nathan," Arthur said, keeping his eyes on Gregory, "did your brother visit your father alone in the weeks before he died?" "Yeah," Nathan said, confusion turning to suspicion. "Greg was there every night, I thought. I thought he was just being a good son. I was working the harvest, so I was glad he was there." "He wasn't being a good son," Arthur said coldly. "He was conditioning him. It's a psychological technique called gaslighting. You isolate the victim, you feed them false information, you make them doubt their own reality. Gregory wasn't comforting your father. He was convincing him that the farm was failing, that you were failing, that the only way to save the family legacy was to liquidate the assets and put them into a trust that Gregory would control. That's a lie," Gregory shouted, standing up again. This time, the anger was real. His face flushed red, mirroring his brother's earlier state. "You have no proof. Just because you read a few books on body language doesn't mean you know anything about my family. I know that you are checking your watch every 30 seconds, Arthur countered calmly, "which suggests you have a deadline, or perhaps someone is waiting for you, someone who expects payment today, someone who doesn't take no for an answer." Arthur turned to the lawyer. "Mr. Henderson, check the visitor logs for the hospital, and check the notary records for the date the new will was drafted. I'm willing to bet my license that the notary used was not the family's usual one, but someone Gregory brought in, someone perhaps ... compromised." Mr. Henderson was typing furiously on his laptop. He stopped, his face going pale. The notary. It was a mobile service, signed at 11 p.m., 2 days before Mr. Pierce passed away. "At 11 p.m., Arthur repeated, "when the hospital staff is minimal, when the patient is likely sedated and disoriented." Nathan stood up, slowly. The rage was gone, replaced by a horror that was far more terrifying to witness. He looked at his younger brother, really looked at him, seeing the stranger beneath the skin he had known all his life. "Greg ... tell me you didn't. Tell me you didn't torment Dad in his last hours for money." Gregory didn't answer. He was breathing hard now, trapped. He looked at the window, at the door, anywhere but at his brother. "He did," Arthur said softly, "but it's worse than that. He didn't just do it for money. Look at his mouth, Nathan. Look at the way he's biting his lower lip. That's shame. But look at his chin. It's thrust forward. That's defiance. He feels justified. He thinks he deserves it." Arthur leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the room. "You've always been the smart one, haven't you, Gregory? The one with the potential. Nathan was just the brute, the worker. You were meant of greater things. So why should the brute get the land? Why should he get the legacy when you have debts to pay? It wasn't stealing in your mind, was it? It was a correction, a rebalancing of the scales." Gregory let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He didn't even know what he had. He screamed, pointing at Nathan. He was going to keep farming dirt. "That land is worth millions to developers. I had a deal. I had a way out of the debt," Arthur corrected. "Not a way forward for the family. You don't understand," Gregory pleaded, turning to the lawyer, then to Arthur. "They ... they said they would hurt me. They said they would come for me. And now we arrive at the truth," Arthur said, stepping back. "Fear, the most honest emotion of all." The revelation hung in the air, heavy and toxic. The dynamic of the room had completely inverted. Nathan, the aggressor, was now the victim. Gregory, the victim, was the villain. And Arthur, the observer, had become the judge. But the danger wasn't over. Arthur noticed something else. Gregory's hand was in his jacket pocket again, not for the handkerchief. The shape was different, heavier, and the look in Gregory's eyes had shifted from panic to a cold, desperate resolve. A cornered animal is the most dangerous kind, and Gregory Pierce had just run out of corners. Arthur tensed, his muscles coiling. "Nathan, get back," he warned, his voice sharp. "What?" Nathan asked, dazed. He's not just in debt to gamblers, Nathan, Arthur said, his eyes locked on Gregory's pocket. He's in debt to people who require collateral, and I think he brought something to ensure he leaves this room with a signature. Gregory pulled his hand from his pocket. It wasn't a gun, it was a phone, but the way he held it, with his thumb hovering over the screen, suggested it was a trigger of a different sort. I sent a message, Gregory whispered, his voice trembling with a terrifying mixture of fear and malice. I told them the meeting was going badly. I told them Nathan was being difficult. Who? Nathan asked. The people who own my debt, Gregory said, tears finally spilling over, real ones this time. Tears of terror. They're downstairs, Nathan. They're in the lobby. And if I don't walk out of here with the deed transfer, they're coming up. Arthur looked at the door. He calculated the time. Security in the building was good, but not private army good. If Gregory was involved with a cartel or a major syndicate, typical building security was just a speed bump. Mr. Henderson, Arthur said, his voice calm but urgent. Lock the door. Now. As the lawyer scrambled to the door, Arthur turned to the brothers. The psychological game was over. The physical reality was about to begin. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about survival. The click of the heavy deadbolt sliding into place sounded like a thunderclap in the silent office. Mr. Henderson backed away from the door, his hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped his glasses. He looked at the mahogany barrier as if it were made of paper, then turned his wide, terrified eyes to Arthur. What do we do? The lawyer whispered, his voice barely audible. Do I call the police? Police response time in downtown Houston is 7 minutes on a good day, Arthur replied, his tone clipped and efficient. He was already moving, scanning the room for tactical advantages. If Gregory's associates are in the lobby, they are 2 minutes away. The elevator ride is 45 seconds. We don't have 7 minutes. Arthur turned his gaze to Gregory, who was still clutching his phone like a lifeline. The younger brother was pale, sweating profusely now, the reality of what he had unleashed finally crashing down on him. He looked like a child who had started a fire he couldn't control. Who are they, Gregory? Arthur demanded. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice had the cold, hard edge of command. Names. Now, I don't know their real names, Gregory stammered, his eyes darting around the room. They call the main guy the architect. He runs the high-stakes games in the warehouse district. I owe him everything. The architect, Arthur repeated, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. He knew the profile. Organized crime, sophisticated, brutal but calculated. They wouldn't storm a law office with guns blazing unless they had no other choice. They preferred coercion. They preferred fear. He's not coming up to kill us, Arthur deduced, his mind racing. Not yet. He's coming up to ensure the signature. He needs the legal veneer. If he kills Nathan, the probate freezes. He needs Nathan alive and compliant. Arthur turned to Nathan. The older brother was standing by the window, looking down at the street below. He seemed paralyzed, his world having shattered twice in the span of an hour, first by his brother's betrayal, now by the threat of violence. Nathan, Arthur said, snapping his fingers to break the trance, I need you to focus. Your anger. Remember that anger you felt earlier. I need you to find it again, but I need you to control it. Can you do that? Nathan looked at Arthur, his eyes clearing. The fear was still there, but beneath it, the old, stubborn resilience of a man who had worked the land his whole life was surfacing. I can try. What do you want me to do? I want you to sign the papers, Arthur said. What? Nathan and Mr. Henderson shouted in unison. You're going to sign, Arthur continued, his eyes narrowing as he formulated the plan. But not the papers Gregory brought. Mr. Henderson, do you have the original will? The one the father signed 5 years ago? The one giving the land to Nathan? Yes, it's in the safe, Henderson said, confused. Get it out. and get a blank transfer deed. We are going to stage a play, Arthur said, a grim smile touching his lips. Gregory is an actor, isn't he? Well, it's time for the performance of his life, but this time he's going to be playing the role I give him. Arthur walked over to Gregory and grabbed him by the lapels of his expensive suit, pulling him close. Listen to me closely, Gregory. You have two choices. Option A, your friends come through that door, realize you haven't secured the signature, and decide you're a liability. You know what they do to liabilities. Option B, you do exactly what I say. You walk out of here with a signed document that looks like a victory. You buy yourself time, and in that time we dismantle them. Gregory was trembling, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. They'll know. They'll check ... double quotes. They won't check the fine print in the elevator, Arthur said. They just want to see ink on paper. They want the win. We give them the win, and then we give them to the FBI. A heavy thud against the office door made everyone jump. Then a knock. Polite, firm, terrifying. Mr. Pierce. A voice came from the hallway. It was deep, calm, and utterly devoid of humanity. We're here to assist with the transition. Arthur signaled for silence. He pointed to Nathan, then to the desk. Sit. He pointed to Henderson. Open the door. Wait. Arthur whispered to Gregory. You need to look triumphant. Wipe your face. Fix your tie. Smugness, Gregory. I want to see that arrogance you had earlier. Channel your inner sociopath. Gregory swallowed hard, wiped his face with his sleeve, and straightened his tie. He took a deep breath, and amazingly, the mask slid back into place. The fear receded behind a veneer of shaky confidence. Mr. Henderson unlocked the door and opened it. Two men stood in the hallway. They were dressed in suits that were too tight across the shoulders, wearing earpieces. Behind them stood a third man, older, wearing a linen suit and a Panama hat. He looked like a grandfather on vacation, except for his eyes. His eyes were dead sharks. The architect. Gentlemen, the architect said, stepping into the room. He didn't look at the lawyer. He looked straight at Gregory. I trust the negotiations have concluded. They have, Gregory said, his voice only wavering slightly. He held up a document. Nathan saw reason. The architect smiled. It was a terrifying expression, devoid of warmth. He walked to a desk where Nathan sat, staring down at the papers. Nathan's hand was resting on a pen. He was sweating, his jaw clenched so tight, a muscle feathered in his cheek. A wise decision, Mr. Pierce, the architect said to Nathan. Family disputes can be so ... messy. It is better to liquidate and move on. Arthur stood by the window, his back to the light, making him a silhouette. He watched the architect's body language. The man was confident, relaxed. He had no idea who Arthur was, likely assuming he was another lawyer or an assistant. That was their advantage. Sign it, Nathan, Gregory said, pushing the document forward. Nathan looked at the paper. It was the transfer deed Arthur had prepared. To the untrained eye, it looked like a total surrender of the estate. But Arthur had instructed Henderson to add a specific clause in the addendum conditions subsequent, tied to a separate affidavit of coercion that Nathan had signed 30 seconds ago and hidden in his boot. Legally, the document was void the moment it was signed because it was signed under duress, and they had the proof of duress recorded on the office security camera, which Arthur had discreetly pointed at the door. Nathan picked up the pen. His hand shook. He looked at the architect, then at Gregory. He channeled every ounce of his hatred into the signature, pressing down so hard the pen tore the paper slightly. Nathaniel J. Pierce. Done. Nathan spat, shoving the paper across the desk. The architect picked it up. He scanned it briefly, checking for the signature, the notary seal which Henderson had applied with trembling hands, and the property description. He nodded. Excellent, the architect said. He folded the document and placed it in his inside pocket. "Gregory, come. We have business to conclude." Gregory hesitated, looking at his brother. "I need a minute." "You don't have a minute," the architect said, his voice dropping a few degrees. "The car is waiting." Gregory looked at Arthur, a silent plea for help in his eyes. Arthur gave a microscopic nod. "Go, play the part." Gregory walked out with the men. The door clicked shut. The moment they were gone, the room exploded into motion. "Call the police now," Arthur barked at Henderson. "Tell them we have a hostage situation involving organized crime. Tell them the architect is moving to the secondary location. Use that name. It will flag in their system." "What about Gregory?" Nathan asked, standing up, his legs shaking. "They're going to kill him when they find out the deed is worthless." "They won't find out for at least an hour," Arthur said, checking his watch. "They need to file it with the county clerk. That gives us a window. But we aren't waiting for the police to save him. We're going to save him." "We?" Nathan asked. "I'm a farmer, not a commando. And I'm a psychologist," Arthur said, grabbing his jacket. "But today, we are improvising. Do you have your truck parked downstairs?" "Yes." "Does it have a GPS tracker? Something you use for the fleet?" "No, but wait. Gregory's phone. We share a family plan. I can track his iPhone." "Brilliant," Arthur said, a rare grin breaking his stoic mask. "Let's go." The chase led them to the industrial outskirts of Houston, a wasteland of rusted warehouses and abandoned shipping containers. The heat was even worse here, radiating off the concrete like a physical blow. Nathan drove his battered Ford F-150 with white-knuckled intensity, following the blue dot on his phone screen. "They stopped," Nathan said, pointing to a large, nondescript warehouse near the ship channel. "Park here," Arthur commanded, pointing to an alleyway 2 blocks down. "We walk the rest." They approached the warehouse silently. Arthur moved with surprising stealth for a man in a 3-piece suit. He signaled Nathan to stay low. They crept up to a side door that was slightly ajar. Inside, voices echoed. Arthur peered through the crack. The warehouse was a high-end gambling den. Poker tables, a bar, and in the center, a small office area enclosed in glass. Inside the glass office, the architect was sitting behind a desk, examining the document with a jeweler's loupe. Gregory was sitting opposite him, looking like he was about to vomit. "The signature is genuine," the architect said, his voice amplified by the cavernous space. "But there is something irregular about the seal." Gregory froze. "What?" "No, it's the standard seal. Mr. Henderson's commission expires in 2 days, the architect noted. "Unusual for a high-end firm to cut it so close." And double quotes. He paused, looking closer. "The paper. It has a watermark. Draft copy. Not for legal submission." The architect looked up. The shark eyes were dead no longer. They were burning. "You tried to cheat me, Gregory." "No, I swear," Gregory screamed, backing away. 2 of the goons grabbed Gregory. The architect stood up, sighing as if disappointed. "I hate waste, but an example must be made. Now," Arthur hissed. Nathan didn't need telling twice. He saw his little brother, the brother who had betrayed him, yes, but still his blood about to be executed. He grabbed a heavy iron pipe lying in the debris and smashed it against the metal door, creating a deafening clang that reverberated through the warehouse. "Hey," Nathan roared, stepping into the light. "Get your hands off him." The goons turned, surprised by the intrusion. The architect looked annoyed. The farmer, how quaint. "Kill them both." But before the goons could draw their weapons, a siren wailed. Not one, but a dozen. The warehouse was suddenly bathed in red and blue flashing lights. Arthur stepped in behind Nathan, holding his phone up. "I didn't just call the police, gentlemen," he announced, his voice projecting clearly. "I called the FBI task force on organized crime. They've been tracking the architect for 3 years. They just needed a location. And, thanks to Gregory's phone, we gave them one. The sound of a battering ram hitting the main doors echoed. FBI, get down, get down. Chaos erupted. The goons scrambled for the back exits, but tactical teams were already breaching the windows. The architect stood still, adjusting his hat, realizing checkmate had been called. In the confusion, Gregory had been shoved to the floor. Nathan ran to him, hauling him up by his collar. For a second, it looked like Nathan might hit him. He raised his fist, the anger of a lifetime of betrayal surging through him. Gregory flinched, closing his eyes, waiting for the blow. But it didn't come. Nathan lowered his hand. He pulled Gregory into a rough, desperate hug. "You idiot," he choked out. "You absolute idiot." Gregory sobbed into his brother's shoulder, the first genuine tears he had shed all day. 6 months later, the sun was setting over the Pierce family farm, casting long golden shadows across the fields of sorghum. The air was cooler now, the oppressive heat of summer finally giving way to a crisp autumn breeze. Nathan sat on the porch swing, a glass of iced tea in his hand. He looked tired, but it was a good tired, the fatigue of honest work, not the exhaustion of stress. A car pulled up the gravel driveway, a modest sedan. Gregory stepped out. He looked different. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a button-down shirt. He looked thinner, humbler. He was wearing an ankle monitor. He walked up the steps slowly, unsure of his welcome. Gregory said, "Hey," Nathan replied. He didn't get up, but he gestured to the empty spot on the swing. Gregory sat down. They swung in silence for a long time, listening to the crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. "How's the program?" Nathan asked finally. "It's hard," Gregory admitted. "Gamblers Anonymous is no joke. And the community service, picking up trash on the highway, is a humbling experience." "Good," Nathan said. "You needed humbling, I know." Gregory looked down at his hands. "Arthur came to see me yesterday." "Oh?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "The Mentalist? What did he want?" "To analyze your blink rate again." Gregory chuckled, a dry sound. "No, he wanted to see if I was real. He said he watched me testify against the architect, said my body language was finally congruent, said I looked like a man telling the truth. And were you?" "For the first time in my life," Gregory said softly. "Yes." He looked at Nathan. "I'm sorry, Nate. For everything. For Dad. For the money. For hating you because you were stronger than me." Nathan took a sip of tea. He looked out at the land that was safe now, the land that would stay in the family. "You weren't hating me because I was stronger, Greg. You were hating yourself because you thought you were weak. But it takes a hell of a lot of strength to testify against a crime syndicate. You did good." Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Gregory. "What's this?" Gregory asked, unfolding it. It was a deed, a transfer of ownership for a small parcel of land, 10 acres, on the south side of the creek. "Dad always wanted you to build a house there," Nathan said gruffly. "Once you're clean, once the debts are paid and the lawyers are done, it's yours. You can't sell it, you can't gamble it, but you can live on it. You can come home." Gregory stared at the paper, his eyes filling with tears. He looked at Nathan, searching for the catch, for the trick. But Arthur Vance wasn't there to analyze it, and he didn't need to be. The truth was written plainly on Nathan's face. "Thank you," Gregory whispered. "Don't thank me," Nathan said, standing up and patting his brother on the shoulder. "Thank the Mentalist. He told me that people don't change when they are comfortable. They change when they're broken. He said we were both broken that day, and maybe that's what we needed to heal." Nathan walked into the house, the screen door slamming shut behind him. Gregory sat alone on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. He took a deep breath, tasting the cool air. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the itch. He didn't feel the need to run, to hide, to lie. He just felt the wood of the swing beneath him and the quiet peace of the land. He was home, and somewhere in the city, In a high-rise office overlooking the lights of Houston, Dr. Arthur Vance closed the file marked Pierce's estate. He picked up his glass of water, took a sip, and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The human puzzle was complex, messy, and often tragic, but every once in a while the pieces fit back together, and that ... that was worth watching. If this story of redemption and the hidden truths of human behavior moved you, please take a moment to leave a comment below. Tell us about a time you had to forgive the unforgivable, or when you realized someone wasn't who they pretended to be. Your stories matter. And don't forget to subscribe and like the video. It helps us bring more of these powerful narratives to light. Remember, the truth is always there, written on the face, if you only know how to look. Until next time, keep your eyes open.